Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome to the revolution. I'm your host, Megan Connor, and today we are recapping day 6 of the Brian Walshe trial. This is the day that, as a fake juror, I finally lost it just a little bit. And I'll give you a clue as to when that was. It had to do with a receipt. We saw receipts today. We saw surveillance footage today. We heard some ridiculously inane cross-examination of the medical examiner in this case. And so my patience was worn just a little bit thin already from the beginning of the day. And then near the end of the day, we saw a receipt that just blew my mind a little bit. Couple that with the fact that on some of the surveillance footage, we see Brian Walshe with his oldest son, whose face had to be blurred out because he has dragged his son into this. So if you're new here for the first time, welcome. Good to see you. And if you're coming back, I'm glad you're here. I am pretending to be a juror on this case. This case intrigued me because I've been to Cohassett, Massachusetts. It's a very small town. It is a little bit like living in a fishbowl where everybody kind of knows your business. And so I was interested in what happened in this case. But I didn't do any research coming to the case in advance. I didn't watch jury selection. I haven't heard any of the pretrial motions, none of that. So I came into it cold, just basically knowing the facts that a woman, a wife, a mother of 3 disappeared on New Year's Day, and that her husband was charged with her redrum. That's pretty much all I knew going into it, although I did know that there was an art fraud case that was involved, but that got talked about on the very first day of trial. So every day at the beginning of trial, the judge asks the jury 4 questions. Have you talked to anybody about the case? Have you done any research about the case? Have you stayed off of social media regarding this case? And do you still have an open mind? Well, obviously, I'm here talking to you guys about the case, but I've asked not to get any spoilers or feedback because I want to do this as a juror would, only reviewing the testimony that the jurors see. So in court every day, when the jury is excused, I turn my video off and I don't watch any of it except what the jury hears. I'm not doing any outside research on this case. I'm not looking up any of the things that I hear during court during the day. It does kill me a little bit not to do that because I do love to do research, but I'm just trying to hear it from the jury's perspective and see what I come up with. I'm staying off of social media. When the videos come up on my YouTube feed, I pass them by. I'm just trying to stay impartial. Now, the last question that the judge asks the jury every day is, do you still have an open mind? And while I have to say that the evidence so far is pretty damning, we've only heard from the prosecution. So I do know that the defense has a defense, but I'm going to say at this point, the only thing that's really going to change my mind is Brian Walshe getting on the stand and telling us why he did the things that he did and why he handled things the way that he did. Because at this moment, he's looking pretty bad, going to be honest with you. So let's get into this. We started off the day with cross-examination of Richard Atkinson, who was the deputy chief medical examiner at the time that this case took place. Now, we already heard from the prosecution that there was no body. There was nothing for him to examine except for some red-brown stains that was brought in on some carpet and some other material that he was examining for possible flesh. And so he was able to examine a couple of what he described as blood clots. And so the defense came back and started asking about these blood clots and possible tissue samples, which he said that he preserved for DNA. There was a lot of discussion from the defense team about something they labeled as, quote, sudden unexpected death. And I wrote, as a juror, I'm wondering what is the relevance and why the defense isn't objecting to leading and to relevance, because he's talking about all these different scenarios of cardiac events, neurological events that could cause a sudden and unexplained death. But in this case, there was no body to examine. So I don't understand why the prosecution is allowing the defense to continue to ask this line of question, which is clearly irrelevant to the investigation. Are we now taking a class on causes of death? Because there's no reason to be asking these questions and speculating when there was nothing to examine in this case. So the defense gave all these examples of possible cardiac events that could cause a sudden death in somebody who was relatively healthy before. And At this point, I'm asking myself, is the prosecution asleep? Are they still there? What is going on? Then he brings up all these neurological cases. And I wrote again, why do we have to listen to this? There's no body and no way to prove any of this happened to Ana Walshe. So then on redirect, finally, the prosecution came back and they talked about some of these possible cardiac conditions. Is it likely? And finally, the medical examiner said, no, there was no evidence, there was no body to examine. So without excluding all of these other factors, there's no way to tell. He said there's zero way to tell if any of these things came into play. Then they talked about medical records, and sometimes they can send out a blind request because in the state of Massachusetts, they are assumed to have to be able to gain access to anybody's medical records if they're examining a death. Then they talked about all of the cardio, the neurological, and asphyxia symptoms that were brought up by the defense. And the medical examiner said those are very, very uncommon, and it's very unlikely that any of that was at play here. That was a really long testimony to go nowhere, essentially, except I do like that the prosecution was able to say, you can't assume any of these things or bring them in because they're really not relevant. So there was that. Witness number 24 for the prosecution was Teresa Marchese. She was the director of human resources, basically, at Tishman Speyer. She's the one who hired Ana Walshe for her job, and she sat 2 seats away from Ana Walshe in an open seating floor plan. She said that Ana lived in Friendship Heights and that her salary was about $220,000 a year. They do offer a MetLife policy as a benefit for their employees at 2 times salary. And she said that Brian Walshe and the kids were the beneficiaries of that. She said that Ana was a co-head property manager and mainly that she managed the Crossing, which is a residential apartment building, and the Mazza building, which was formerly a mall. And then she had some oversight over transforming it into some residences. She said that Tishman Speyer was closed for New Year's Eve and New Year's Day was a floating holiday, and that people were able to choose if they wanted to come in. But for the most part, the office reopened on January 3rd. Teresa said she never had any problems with Ana Walshe or any safety concerns at all. She said the last time that she saw Ana was on the 15th of December at a women's event, and she seemed normal, happy, social, and observed no injuries on her. Then on January 4th, Teresa said a coworker had informed her that Brian Walshe had called looking for his wife, Ana. And so she went into her office with Jeff Chod, who is the head of the DC office, between 10 and 11 a.m., and they called Brian together. Brian said that he hadn't seen Ana Walshe since January 1st, and he said, we've only ever gone more than 24 hours without seeing each other one or 2 times. And he said the last time she was annoyed with me for looking for her too soon. Seems like planting information to me. Teresa said there were no emergencies at any of the buildings, and so there would not have been a reason for Ana Walshe to come back to work early. She was scheduled to come back on the 4th, but Brian said that she left on the 1st due to an emergency at one of the buildings. She described Brian Walshe as polite, calm, and nice, and that their first conversation lasted just a few minutes. She offered to go to Ana Walshe's townhome, which was nearby, to do a wellness check on her. And so sometime between 10:30 and 11:30, she went with a coworker to the townhome. She did ask Brian if Ana Walshe had any kind of mental health concerns or problems, and he said that there were none. So when Teresa arrived at the townhome, she noted that there was a wet Nespresso box out on the porch. And the reason that was significant is because she knew Ana had not been to the townhome in several days because it hadn't rained the previous day. It had rained a few days ago. She noted that there were some Google cameras on the outside of the townhome, but when she asked Brian about them, Brian said that Ana was, quote unquote, the tech one. And he didn't know anything about how to work them or how to retrieve the footage. Teresa noted that the house was immaculate. She looked into the windows and did not see anything amiss. Brian gave her the code to the garage and she checked and there was no car visible. There were some boxes, a car seat, but nothing was out of order, and the door from the garage to the townhome was locked. After inspecting what she could of the townhome, she called Brian Walshe back and she looped in Mr. Dunleavy, who was the head of security at the firm. When the three of them were on the phone together, Teresa mentioned to Brian that Mr. Dunleavy was an ex-Secret Service agent. She said right after she told Brian this, he became emotional for the first time. He sort of broke down and started crying and had to regain his composure. But she said it only took a short time before he was able to come back on the phone and talk to them. They asked for a description of Anna's vehicle, and Brian told them it was a gray VW Taos. They asked about an Easy Pass. They asked if he was on the deed or the mortgage, and he said he didn't know. He said he thought Anna was on the mortgage alone. They asked Brian how Anna got to Washington, D.C., and he said that she flew either on American or jet, but he wasn't sure. So Teresa then went to Starbucks and then went home, where she had a third conversation with Brian Walshe. He noted that he had just hung up with the police and that he was going to file a police report. She again reported that he was polite and calm, and then he did mention that his mother wanted to hire a private investigator. She said there was also a fourth call with Brian that day, but some of the details have gotten conflated in her mind, and she's not sure exactly what was said on each call. She said she received a text message from Brian Walshe on the 5th of January and then didn't have any contact with him after that. When she was asked about bringing her children to the DC area, Anna said to Teresa that she wanted to bring the kids first in the summer. And then when that didn't work out, she wanted to bring them in September. But then there was no more discussion about bringing the kids. And then the prosecution just reiterated that Teresa hasn't seen Ana Walshe since that December 15th women's event. On cross-examination, the defense asked Teresa if Ana Walshe had any sick days. And she said that they have systems that document that, but she's not directly involved in it. Then they asked her about December 7th, and did she know if Anna had traveled to Dublin for her mother's surgery, and she said she wasn't sure. Then she noted that the Crossing Apartments has about 800 units. And they asked her, as an HR representative, are you aware of problems with the buildings? And she said that she was, but she wasn't necessarily involved in all of the everyday details of what went on at the buildings. Then they asked if she was aware that there were tenant complaints at the crossing. They asked her about a Legionnaire's problem, an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease from October to December at the crossing. And she said that she was aware of it. And then the defense asked if she was aware that they had posted notices. And she said she was not aware of that the health department had posted notices at the crossing. And then they asked if she was aware that Ana Walshe was working with the Department of Health. And she said she was vaguely aware, but not of the exact specifics. And then handed her a paper, and she reviewed it, and it seemed to not really have some relevance, because she kept shaking her head and, kind of making this motion. And then defense asked her, are you aware that there were complaints about Ana Walshe in the tenant meetings? And Teresa said she was aware of a variety of issues, but nothing specifically about Ana. Then the defense asked her if she was aware that the FBI had arrested 2 of the tenants. And she said, yes, she was aware, but it happened in April, and she wasn't sure if Ana Walshe was hired at that point, but she was working on whatever she needed to in the aftermath of that. Then defense asked if employees got a discounted rental rate at any of their buildings. And she said, yes, at the crossing, if there are employees, then they can have a discounted rate. Then the defense asked about open enrollment and changes in insurance to medical, dental, and life insurance, asking, that's sort of leading that maybe some changes could have been made to the life insurance policy. And Teresa said that there's open enrollment in November for changes to medical and dental, etc. But she said that the long-term disability is a one-time thing, and you get life insurance upon hire. Every employee gets 2x of their salary as life insurance upon hire. Then the defense asked if Ana Walshe ever brought up a divorce, and there was an objection to that, so she didn't get to answer. Then the defense asked if she worked long hours. And Teresa said, well, she's not an hourly employee, and so I'm sure at times she would have to come in early or stay late to get done what she needed to. Then the defense asked her about talking with Brian Walshe, if she had ever talked with him before, and she said that that January 4th call was the first call she'd ever had with Brian Walshe, and he never asked about any benefits or if he was the beneficiary of anything. Then she was asked about Jeff Chod, who is the head of the region and supervised Ana Walshe, and she said she didn't know if Brian Walshe had ever contacted Jeff. Then the defense started asking about performance bonuses and saying that she would have an assessment, wouldn't she, if she was going to have a bonus, that they would assess her work performance. And Teresa said that that's part of the process, but it's a team that kind of handles that. And then the defense asked if the complaints against her from the tenants at the crossing would have affected her bonus or if there was an evaluation. And she said she wasn't aware of anything that would have affected that. Then on redirect, the prosecution clarified that January 1st was a floating holiday, so she could have taken that day off if she wanted to. Then they asked if the Friday after Thanksgiving was a floating holiday, and she said yes, it was. Then she reiterated that Ana did receive her bonuses and reiterated that complaints from the tenants would not have affected her bonus and that she was a good employee. Then we went to Davis Gould. If you'll remember that name from before, he did previously testify that he went to a facility in Danvers to process some of the materials that were collected at the Walshe home. And he said he actually went to Sudbury to submit those samples for drying. And then he was presented with an evidence bag that contained the black jacket. And originally, the prosecution said that that bag also contained socks and a bracelet, but noted that the black jacket was in the bag by itself and that the socks and the bracelet had been repackaged so that they could be processed separately. I think this was just sort of an administrative issue. Now, defense witness number 26 was Hugh Dunleavy. He's the chief security officer that we mentioned previously in Teresa's testimony. He said that from 1993 to 2014, he worked with the Secret Service, and he knew Ana Walshe well. They sat about 10 feet away from each other at work. He said that he knew she was working at the Crossing and the Mazza buildings, and that there were no threats against her. He said that on January 4th, he became aware that Ana was missing because people were asking about her, and he sent a text to her cell phone to check on her, but he doesn't know if it was delivered. Most of the time, he said on his text messages, there would be a little indicator that a text had been delivered, but he received no indicator this time. Again, he sent that text on January 4th. He said that same day he spoke with Brian Walshe. He said initially Brian was calm and cordial, but then he got emotional and was unintelligible for about 20 to 30 seconds, and then he was able to regain his composure. Brian said that he saw Ana last late on the 31st or early on the 1st. This is a change from what he said before because he indicated before that he saw her before she left on the 1st. He said that being gone for 3 days without communication was not normal and that she had to go back for a work emergency. But Hugh Dunleavy says he was unaware of any emergency, and Brian Walshe was nonspecific about what that emergency would have been. Mr. Dunleavy asked Brian about her mode of transport, and he was unaware. He said, "Did you have any Find My turned on, like Find My iPhone, etc.?" He said no, that he didn't. Hugh Dunleavy then told him that it was imperative that he contact law enforcement and that he must. He said, "I will hang up and report her, and I suggest you do the same." And he said, I will. Then Brian Walshe also said that he was going to call friends and family. At that point, Hugh Dunleavy took 2 engineers who worked for the company to Ana Walshe's townhome. They texted outside the townhome to get permission to access the residence. He noted that there was no forced entry, and the engineers drilled the lock so that the Metropolitan Police Department could go inside the townhome. He said they were inside for about 15 minutes, and Ana Walshe was not there. He said at 5 p.m., Brian Walshe texted asking if he found Ana Walshe's car, which Hugh Dunleavy did find her car. He said it was located in the garage at the DC Crossing building. That's one of the ones that Ana was in charge of managing. He said that there was video surveillance of her coming into the garage on the 30th of December, but it was dark, and she came in via her access card that was provided by the company. He also noted that her company email was last used on December 30th, that she had a company laptop and a corporate phone and 2 corporate American Express cards. He said the last time there was a non-recurring charge on one of those cards was on the 30th of December. He also said he recovered the contents of her vehicle and turned those over to law enforcement. There were no questions from the defense for this witness. Witness number 27 was Patricia Patterson. She was the one who worked at Walgreens for 24 years, and she said that they have surveillance videos that are recorded in real time, one at the front door, the one at the registers, and one at the pharmacy. She said the videos are stored in a locked cabinet, and then they played a video from January 1st at about 3:40 p.m. Now this is Brian Walshe entering the Walgreens, and I'm playing these videos a little bit sped up so that they won't take quite so long. And again, this is Brian Walshe checking out at that Walgreens on January 1st at around 3:40 p.m. Then we get to see the receipt from the Walgreens where we see that Brian bought Band-Aids and antibiotic ointment and that he paid with a Visa card. After this witness gave her testimony, there was a lot of jaw clenching and sighing from Brian Walshe. Witness number 20 was Joseph Caesars from Vin Vin Liquors, and that store is next to Whole Foods. They share an entrance and an exit. He noted that Brian Walshe was a regular customer, that he had interacted with him dozens of times, and sometimes he would just hang out when he didn't have anything better to do. He said that they had extensive cameras, over 40 total on the property, that the videos were digitally downloaded. And then we saw this video. Again, I'm playing this a little bit sped up. And this is the camera that is just outside the liquor store in the front. You see Brian Walsh's Volvo pull up and then reverse, and then just very strangely turn all the way around and park in one of the spaces. Now, I had made some speculations earlier in one of my recaps about all these places he visited on New Year's Day, wondering if they were even open. And it appears that this place is not open because there are no other patron vehicles in the parking lot. And again, this was about 5:12 p.m. on the 1st of January. He sits in his car for a long time before exiting the car. He goes to the trunk. He takes out a bag. Closes the trunk. It looks to be a trash bag. And then he comes back to the vehicle without the bag. Then we get to see another angle, and this is the loading dock behind the store. And you can see, I'll rewind it again, throwing something in the dumpster and then leaving. Then they're going to bring up the timestamps of these cameras. And it's hard to see on this screen because the videos are published to a screen, and then you're seeing them on my screen too. But again, it indicates that this was January 1st, about 5:12 p.m. Then this witness noted that they are not open on New Year's Day, and that those dumpsters then would have been emptied on the following Monday or Tuesday after New Year's Day. Then witness number 29 for the prosecution is someone named Cade Reed, who is a Lowe's area asset protection manager for the last 4 years. he's over the Danvers and the Weymouth stores, and that he said they have extensive cameras as well that are digital to the exterior hard drive. They have 45 cameras in their parking lot, and then we get to see an extensive video of Brian Walshe in the Lowe's in Danvers. This is the parking lot camera that is facing the entrance of the store. And again, I am playing these sped up just to save some time. And you can see right now Brian Walshe heading towards the store entrance. And you can see him entering the store. He's wearing a black mask on his face and he's wearing blue gloves. And you can see him retrieve a shopping cart, and then he spends a lot of time in aisle 1. And I will go ahead and let the entirety of this video play. The video then skips to the self-checkout area of the store where Brian Walshe comes to check out, and he brings his shopping cart. And I'm going to slow this down to regular speed now because I want you to be able to see not only what he's buying, but also his impatience with the clerks. We are going to get to see the receipt from this transaction, but it looks like, from what I can see, he's got a lot of cleaning products in the cart there. He's got 5 buckets. He's got some Clorox bathroom cleaner. He buys a box of rags, several boxes of heavy-duty wipes, and we can clearly see at one point the hacksaw, the packing tape, there's a mop, some shop towels, and then he pays in cash. You can see him taking out the cash to pay with, and this witness noticed that Brian Walshe left the Lowe's at about 6:56 p.m. on the 1st. They do then show Brian Walshe exiting the store with his shopping cart, and here's a copy of the receipt. We see over-the-glass safety goggles, an 8-pack of latex gloves, 3M sanding paper, cotton mop combo, a steel framing hammer, slip-resistant booties, a cotton mop refill, a pair of tin snips, a fixed blade utility knife, a box of rags, straight long cutting snips, a Tyvek full coverage medical gear, a 12-count pack of shoe guards, a high-tension hacksaw, 2 packages of Scotch blue painter's tape, a 32-ounce Clorox cleanup, a 128-ounce Clorox cleanup, a spray bottle, 2 42-gallon, 24-count 3M contractor's wipes, a box of Moxie terry towels, 48-count, and 5 5-gallon Lowe's buckets for a total of $436.89, with tax, $463.26. He presented $500 in cash. Then we go to the security footage of the Lowe's in Weymouth. And this is the point where I got pretty agitated because we see Brian Walshe walking in with his oldest son, whose face is blurred. Then we see Brian approaching the cash register with a steel trash can. And I'm going to go to normal speed and see if you can pick out the point where I got super frustrated. Oh, he catches a glimpse of himself in the camera and he can't help but stare himself down, smooth his hair, and then come back with this smarmy little look. This is where all the snark comes out for me, you guys. At this point, I've had it. And there's one other point when we're going to take a look at a receipt that you're going to see a little bit more frustration from me before I can go back to my position of trying to remain as neutral as possible and waiting for the defense to present any kind of evidence that would explain this behavior. And again, this video was recorded on the 4th of January at approximately 4:57 p.m. The next witness, witness number 30 for the prosecution, is Jamie Flynn, who is an operations manager at CVS. She's been there for 19 years, and she notes that they have multiple cameras throughout their store, and we're again going to get to see the camera footage from this transaction as well. Here's the video from the CVS transaction where we see Brian Walshe enter the store, and then later we see him at the self-checkout. I'm going to go ahead and speed this up quite a bit because it is rather lengthy. But we will get to see the receipt from this transaction as well. And again, this surveillance footage was taken on the 1st of January at approximately 6:28 p.m. He's waiting for a cashier to come and help him. And then he is again going to pay in cash. And then we do get to see the receipt from this transaction. And this is where I had a little bit of a hard time today, you guys, because we can see that he purchased a total of 6 items. 5 of them were CVS hydrogen peroxide spray. And the last item is the Feed America Roundup. So his subtotal was $17.91, and he went ahead and rounded up the 46 cents after tax to go ahead and make it an even $19. So, he's buying hydrogen peroxide, but at least he's a good enough guy to do the Feed the Hungry Children Roundup. Anyway, witness number 31 was Gregory Deneen, and he works for the parent company of Stop and Shop. He showed us the recordings of Brian Walshe arriving at the Swampscott Stop and Shop at approximately 7:02 p.m. on January 1st. And then, of course, here he is at the South checkout. And we're going to get to see the receipt from this transaction as well. And this transaction notes that he bought some coconut water as well as 3 gallons of ammonia cleaner. And he paid cash for this as well. And the time on that receipt is 6:52 p.m. on the 1st. The next witness number 32, is Matthew Seaton of the State Police Crime Lab. He's been there for 12 years. He's got a bachelor's in forensic science with a chemistry emphasis. And he said that he went to the crime lab, he went to the Walshe residence on the 8th of January at 8:45 a.m. to collect evidence and biological material. He said he was in charge of collecting blood and trace evidence. And he said that he noted that there was hydrogen peroxide in the kitchen and a knife in the cabinet above the refrigerator. So this is the cabinet above the fridge. And zooming in and taking some of those things out of there, there's a knife right here. And I'm going to do a few spoilers because this testimony does go on for quite some time. I will show you the pictures, but we could just, play a little game. We've seen the pictures of what was collected, and we basically know what they looked for and tested in the house. And so if you wanted to, we could say, hey, blood or no blood, what do you think? He said that he tested the sink knobs, the sink basin, and the H2O2 bottles, or the hydrogen peroxide bottles. But he did not test the inside of the dishwasher. And I think this might have been a little bit of a dig at the stupidity of Brian Walshe, because there was a search on his computer as to whether the dishwasher would destroy DNA on a knife. Spoiler alert, there was blood found on the knife. So did he not run it through the dishwasher after performing that search? Because the reason the text stated that he didn't test for blood inside the dishwasher is because the dishwasher's function is to sanitize everything that goes in it, so it would have destroyed any DNA evidence. But they made a point of bringing this up in testimony. Was it a dig? I don't know. Then he tested the half bath with the washer and dryer and the sink in that room. Those were all negative for blood. Then he went to the basement where he tested some purple stains on the floor, and those were positive for blood. I'm going to go ahead and show you all of the screenshots from this, but I will include the timestamps in the description so that you can go watch them for yourself, because they are a little harder to see here. Then he also tested something on the ceiling for blood, and that was negative. Then they made a decision to secure the scene and return on the 9th, where he then tested the second floor bedrooms. He said he took samples from the floor and the curtains in the main bedroom, and those were all negative for blood. Then somebody made the decision that some flooring was to be removed to test that for blood or DNA, and while that was happening, he went back down to the basement where he had previously collected material. He said that he tested some areas from the basement steps, and that was negative, but the area on the basement floor, that was positive. He then reiterated that the kitchen knife was positive. And if you remember seeing this picture from the recap the other day, when they collected samples from the trash, they showed us each of these implements that they collected. And here are the tin snips. Those were positive. The hacksaw was positive. The face of the hammer was positive. The hatchet blades and the frame had some greasy spots on it, which he preserved for samples. And I'm sorry, this is graphic, but he said that sometimes when an instrument like this is used on a human, that sometimes there is some greasy residue from fatty tissue, and he preserved all of those for DNA testing. Then he noted that the head and the handle were positive for blood. Then this pair of shears was also positive for blood. The Tyvek booties, painter's tape, and insulation from the ceiling were negative. Then he tested 5 different painter's sheets that were all about 8 by 11. He said the first area he tested was negative and the second area he tested was positive. Then he tested the jacket, which was negative. Then these paper towels, which were positive. This towel was positive. This dish towel was also positive. The dark gray slippers were also positive, and he noted that he swabbed the inside of the slippers for skin cells to determine who might have been wearing the slippers. You might remember there was a clump of hair on these slippers, which he took 2 random samples from. And this hair, which was hair number 1, was a human hair. And this hair, which was hair number 2, was an animal hair. Then he tested this wipe and sponge, which were both positive. Then he tested a carpet sample, and this was positive. Then he tested the Tyvek suit, and 4 areas on the Tyvek suit were positive. Then he noted that he tested 2 different pieces of carpet, both of which were positive for blood. And then he said he found some white powder, which was sent to another unit for testing. You can see the white powder on the center there. And then he chose 5 random hairs from this sample, all of which were human, and some unknown tissue, which was also sent to another unit for testing. Now, he noted that all of the samples that were positive for blood, he preserved part of that sample to then go on and be tested for DNA. On cross-examination, the only thing that the defense really had to bring up was that there were multiple people in and out of the house prior to him getting there, and they were trying to allege some kind of crime scene contamination, but they really failed to make that argument successfully, as the technician here went through the extensive measures that they go through to make sure that their testing areas are clean and to make sure that the samples are collected in a clean way. All the time that they were going through these blood samples, there was a lot of mouth covering and a lot of fidgeting from Brian Walshe. He looks very, very uncomfortable. Now, I am all caught up and I'm going to be watching day 7 with you and hopefully having my recap for you shortly after the trial day ends. Join me here for more extensive recaps. And again, as a fake juror, I'm keeping my mind open for any evidence that the defense might be able to offer that explains this behavior. Now, I will say I'm not supposed to know this as a fake juror, I believe, but as I was watching Law and Crime, and by the way, I'm using their clips in accordance with YouTube's fair use policy, and I appreciate their coverage and their footage, but at the very bottom of the crawl, you can see a crawl going across. And I didn't really pay attention to it until today when the defense attorney was going on and on and on about possible causes of death when there's no body to examine. And I happened to glance down and read that Brian Walshe did plead guilty to dismemberment and to lying to police, but that he's still being tried for murder here. And so I'm not sure how all of that's going to play in or when the jury might or might not even be informed of that. But it doesn't change my opinion. All it does is actually raise a question as to, okay, if you're going to cop to dismembering somebody, explain why. Make it make sense. And so that's what I'm waiting for as a fake juror. I hope you'll join me. After my deliberations, I'm going to do a live show where you'll get my real-time reaction because my friend Kirsten is going to come and show me all of the things that I've been missing behind the scenes while I'm pretending to be a juror. I hope you'll join me, and please take a second to like and subscribe. I'll see you again tomorrow.